Hey everyone, welcome to my advanced brake and aerodynamics tuning video. Adjusting both your aero and braking are some of the more simple and straightforward aspects of tuning, so I've decided to combine them into one video. Let's start with braking. First, some basic braking philosophy. Your braking ability can never exceed the grip of your tires, so if you have fully upgraded brakes but are still running skinny stock tires, a lot of potential braking ability is being wasted. So always make sure that you upgrade your tire width and or compound to match your brakes. We'll go into how to do that a bit later. Now let's talk ABS. You have the option to turn this on or off for any car in the settings menu, and it greatly affects how your car drives. ABS, or anti-lock brake system, is a feature that can dynamically adjust braking pressure to prevent your wheels from locking up. With it on, you can press the brakes as hard as you'd like and your wheels won't lock up, decreasing the amount of time it takes to brake and meaning you'll still be able to steer the car under hard braking. However, ABS isn't a perfect system, and with good manual brake control, you can almost always outbrake a car using ABS. So, your choice is between consistent but slightly less efficient braking with ABS on, or having to manually manage your braking pressure, risking locking up your wheels for the potential reward of much faster braking if managed properly. This choice also affects how you tune your brakes. So let's actually get into the tuning here, starting by getting ourselves familiar with the friction tab of telemetry. This shows us the amount of grip available to each tire, and as you can see with ABS on while I'm braking, the friction is bouncing as the car tries to keep traction on the tires. With ABS off and full braking, the friction just maxes out as the wheels freeze against the road. So what can this tell us for brake tuning? If we hop into the tuning window, you can see that we have two adjustments to make: front and rear brake balance and overall brake pressure. It's worth noting that brake balance is a bit backwards, and moving the slider toward front will actually increase pressure in the rear, and vice versa for moving the slider to the rear. So as you brake, most of your weight shifts to the front of the car, and your front brakes do the majority of the work, while your rear brakes are meant more to keep the car balanced and straight, while also assisting in slowing the car down. A car with softer suspension will shift more weight to the front, and thus need more braking power shifted to the front as well, while a car with very stiff suspension, or say a rear engine car that has more weight in the rear, will be able to use more of the rear brakes to slow the car down. Use the friction tab of telemetry to make sure both front and rear brakes are being used effectively. For example, if your rear brakes are not exceeding well over 100% friction under full braking, you probably aren't utilizing all of your rear brakes. You can also take a look at the simulated braking distance on the tuning window, but keep in mind every time this is recalculated, the value can and will change. As you can see, I'm moving the slider right back into the same spot, but my braking distance numbers change each time, so make sure you recalculate a few times by moving the slider back and forth one notch and just looking at the average difference in brake distance between two set values. You should focus more on making sure that total brake time is reduced and that you're using your brakes to the fullest, but also remember that shifting brake balance more to the front can reduce stability and increase understeer when entering a corner, whereas more rear braking will reduce braking stability and increase corner entry oversteer. And finally, in general, you never want to be moving the slider too far for normal track driving. I'd set a limit of about 20% in either direction. Now let's dive into pressure quickly. If you play with ABS on, adjusting pressure makes nearly no difference, as the ABS will always be dynamically adjusting braking pressure on its own anyway. So leave this at 100% unless you want to adjust how sharply the brakes come on when pressing down on the brake button. If you want to brake a bit smoother, take it down to around 90%. Now, if you're playing with ABS off, pressure plays a big role in your braking feel. Ultimately, this does just all come down to driver feel, so adjust this to your own preference, but for a quick reference, lower pressures will be easier to manage when learning ABS off driving, but you'll often need to leave pressures stock or turn them up to get a benefit in braking ability over cars driving with ABS. Now, before we move on to aerodynamics, let's touch on that point I brought up earlier, which was making sure your tire upgrades match your brake upgrades. If you notice that you're having to turn your overall pressure really low to get good braking without the tires locking up, it's usually a tire compound issue, and that's what you should upgrade. However, if you notice you're having to shift your front-rear brake balance outside that roughly 10 to 20% acceptable range, that's usually a tire width issue, and you should upgrade the width of your tires at least one notch. And that's just about all there is to the essentials of brake tuning. Luckily, brake tuning is pretty straightforward, and it's easy to just change up a couple tuning values, go test them out on the track, or just look at your simulated values and see real concrete evidence as to whether or not you've improved or hurt the performance of your car. It can be a lot harder to get such concrete evidence for things like suspension tuning. Now, moving on to the next relatively easy tuning section, let's talk about aerodynamics. In almost all cars, you'll need to put on the Forza front splitter and rear wing in order to unlock the tuning options in the tuning window. Aerodynamics get more effective the faster you're going, which means less effective the slower you're going. So, in low-class cars and on low-speed tracks, aero is more or less useless. Keep this in mind when deciding whether or not to add adjustable aero to your car, as it does cost a good bit of PI on a lot of cars. Now, the more you adjust this slider to cornering, the more downforce you're adding and the more effective your aero becomes. Front aero will increase grip over your front tires, increase oversteer, and in general just improve your cornering ability. Rear aero increases grip over the rear wheels, and if too excessive, can lead to understeer. Front aero is often more important than rear in a track setting, and should generally be prioritized, but if you notice your rear end sliding out under high-speed cornering, feel free to increase rear downforce as well. There is a balance to find here. Too much front downforce without any rear will often lead to a lot of unwanted drifting, and too much rear without much front will cause terrible understeer. Finally, and you've probably already been thinking of this, downforce always decreases acceleration and top speed. The more effective the aero, the more it hampers speed and acceleration. Your 0 to 60 times will rarely be affected much by any level of downforce, but high speed acceleration can definitely be hurt if you have too much. Keep this in mind when deciding what you're tuning your car for. In most cases though, the huge increase in handling ability from good downforce is usually worth the hit in high-speed acceleration and top speed. And one final note for tuning aerodynamics is that more downforce means hotter tires. This is usually a good thing, but just remember to consider it when you're tuning your tire pressures. And that's essentially all there is to tuning aerodynamics. This is another pretty simple and straightforward one, but does play a huge role in the feel of your car. If you're somewhat new to tuning, aerodynamics is a great place to start, as it's another place you can see really concrete evidence for how your car is changing in its handling when you're changing the tuning values. And that just about wraps it up for this video. I hope you've been enjoying these more deep dives into the tuning windows. This is the second video, my first being about differential tuning, and I will be continuing the series moving on. So I hope you're looking forward to the next one. I will see you in another video. Thanks for watching.